Like many of you, over the last couple of weeks I've been following so-called Twitter drama. You know, all those events and rumors related to the fact that Elon Musk became the new Twitter CEO and started managing this company in a pretty unexpected way. Today I'd like to continue on this subject, but I'm not going to tell you how it is like to work at Twitter because I have no idea how it is like, but I'd like to tell you about some distortions that may influence the way you perceive all those rumors. Today I have prepared a list of 5 cognitive biases that may negatively impact the way you consume information coming from different channels such as social media. Let's see how it works and let's get started. Before I give you this list of cognitive biases, let me answer the question, why the hell did I decide to share anything about cognitive biases on such an engineering-oriented channel, and what the hell is cognitive bias? Because of the fact that we are on an engineering-oriented channel, I will use the reference to the world of system design, and I'd like to explain what cognitive biases are by showing you 2 services communicating with each other. Imagine that you have 2 services. Service A is producing some information and Service B is meant to consume this information. At the same time, engineers who are overseeing those services are aware of the fact that some distortions are constantly happening in between. Every single time that Service A produces an information, let's say a number 6, the Service B sees it as a number 4, receives some distorted information. So engineers managing the system know that something's wrong in terms of the relay between those 2 services. And this is exactly how cognitive biases impact our understanding of the world around us. Whenever Service A, which is the ecosystem, the environment we live in, produces some information, some news or rumors or facts or events, they may be distorted by some cognitive biases. So cognitive biases work as, for example, filters through which those information are passing through, and they may change the message content. Message content can be distorted in a both positive and negative way. All you need to know after this episode is that such thing exists, and it may impact how you perceive information and how well you may understand everything that is happening around you. And I will use this reference to the Twitter drama because in my opinion it shows pretty well how those cognitive biases affect our understanding of the world around us and how often they occur in everything we read and watch on a regular basis. Let's see how it works. The first cognitive bias that I'd like to mention is probably the most frequently occurring one, and it is called anecdotal evidence. How does it work? Basically, whenever someone tells you a story, whenever someone describes you some situations they've been in, someone tells you about their experiences, you may encounter this thing called anecdotal evidence. Basically, anecdotal evidence is a story told to you by individuals. How does it work in case of Twitter? You can imagine that there are plenty of employees who are currently unhappy because of the way the company is managed by Elon Musk. For obvious reasons, they are not disclosing their personal identity, but still, all in all, they want to share this information with the public audience. So, what do? They are using some proxies in a form of journalists, and through those proxies they are communicating how this company works and what the hell is going on inside. So every single time you read some stories prepared by journalists where they mention that they are relying on some sources, some signalists, some undisclosed employees, you may encounter anecdotal evidences. And how does it work in practice? For example, you can imagine that there is an employee who is unhappy about how this company is managed, so he is saying that the company is now very terrible, everything that is going on inside is basically broken, therefore the company is doomed to fail. Or something different, someone is very happy about how the company operates nowadays, sometimes they may admire the way that Elon Musk works and acts on a regular basis, therefore someone may extrapolate from that, saying that the Twitter will definitely succeed. All those stories are nothing but stories. They are not empirical evidences, they do not contain any statistics, any measurements, any data, and you shouldn't treat it as an evidence of any sort. The second cognitive bias that I'd like to bring up in this episode is very often mixed up with the previously mentioned one, and it is called authority bias. How does it work? I think this is pretty straightforward. Basically, the more we consider someone an authority or a role model, the higher value we find in their opinions. The risk is that we may be more focused on who is sharing those opinions instead of what those opinions actually consist of. In case of Twitter, it may be also boosted up by the fact that we all live in our local social media bubbles and we are following people we like. We are following our role models, we are following our authorities or people we'd like to become at some point in the future, and we'll be heavily relying on their opinions on what is going on in this company. So now, depending on who you follow in social media, your opinions and thinking about the environment, about the world around you, might be heavily influenced by those people. So if you are following entrepreneurs, most likely you will have some positive sentiment on what is going on in Twitter. If you are following some employee activists, your sentiment may be rather negative and you may think that the Twitter is doomed to failure. In both cases, your opinion is not exactly based on facts or based on data, but it is based on who is sharing this opinion. So you are under influence of authority bias. The third bias, or the third effect that may happen, that may influence you and the way you perceive information, happens every single time some group of people changes their mind. How does it work in practice? Well, I can recall my times as an Angular engineer when I was observing how people around me start migrating to React. At that time, React was considered as a mainstream, but for some people it was a mainstream only because their peers and their teammates started investing heavily in React ecosystem. So on the very beginning there were no real benefits of migrating to React, but because of the fact that it started gaining a lot of adoption very quickly, people started considering it as a mainstream, as an A player, as something that is worth pursuing. So this is a good example of how bandwagon effect works. Basically, bandwagon effect works every single time when group of people influences the way you perceive information. And in case of Twitter, it may be that the social media bubble that you currently live in may have some negative sentiments on what is going on in Twitter, but it may happen that at some point in the future Twitter will bring some positive outcomes, right? The way that Elon is managing the company may bring some positive results, might bring some interesting features, and you will notice that the wall of people you follow may start sharing much more positive information on what is going on in Twitter. And based on that, only based on that, you may change your mind and you may be influenced by so-called bandwagon effect. So you need to always get back to the topic of what this opinion is actually about. Not who is sharing that, not how many people are sharing that, but what this opinion is actually all about. This time I'd like to move to the topic of the confirmation bias, which is more like an internal effect that we are heavily influenced by. What confirmation bias is? Well, this is a tendency that most humans have, which is about following those information which match our internal beliefs, our tradition, our background, and basically our principles that we represent on a regular basis. For me personally, for someone who is coming from a very technical background, it may be much more likely that I will seek for information which proves that those changes that Elon is introducing and applying in Twitter are rather positive, right? It will be not my default behavior to seek for some counter arguments. I will not tend to look for some people who disagree with him, because basically confirmation bias will be something that will be influencing my information perception. And it also happens every time you are personally seeking for some information, just for the sake of, saving energy and keeping yourself in this comfort zone. You will be looking for some data or facts or numbers that will be matching your worldview, your perspective on anything around you. So be aware of confirmation bias. Every time you are sharing some information, you're actually reinforcing this confirmation bias, and you are not trying to share anything objective, but you are trying to prove your point, whatever this point actually is about. And the last one that I'd like to bring up in this episode is so-called naive realism. What the naive realism is, basically there is a belief that all those biases and those effects that I mentioned in this episode do not apply to us. Yes, maybe some other people, maybe those uneducated ones, may be influenced by those effects, but for me personally, I will be perceiving the world in a way it really is, in a very objective way. It is called naive realism for some reason. We are really heavily influenced by all those distortions, by all the cognitive biases, and some of them are coming from the evolutionary background. Basically, only because of the fact that our brain is trying to save some energy for seeking facts and basically not spending much time on checking details, on verifying results, we'll be tend to make those shortcuts when seeking for some information. So all those cognitive biases that I mentioned, both authority bias or anecdotal evidence, or bandwagon effect, are here to do something positive for us, and for the same reason they are doing something negative for us. So if you think that for you as a person you are the only one who is perceiving the reality in a very objective way, you might be influenced by naive realism. So just to wrap up, how does it relate to the Twitter drama? I think it's better to wait until this fog of war is gone and we have a much better understanding of what actually happened inside, what kind of steps Elon Musk took to update how this company operates, and only then we'll be a little bit closer to the objective reality, and even then it won't be everything that happened inside. Hopefully this episode was interesting for you. Let me know if you are also aware of some other biases that are influencing your well-being, and in case of Twitter, let's see how it develops over time. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for this product because I'm a heavy user of Twitter, so it would be great to see some new features or some improvements coming to the end users. See you next time.